Good morning. Hi, how are you? I believe that everyone is good. Okay. Today, we are going to discuss voice. Generally, people listen to the word, Obviously, people would remember different kinds of voice. Of course, one among the families is mimicry. Even we try to do the mimicry with our teachers, with our friends, celebrities, and so on. But actually, we are not going to discuss that part. Instead, we are going to discuss grammatical part known as active voice and passive voice. Generally, we call them as voice. Let's see how to write active voice and passive voice sentences and what are the differences and why it is becoming important. Okay, with some examples, let us try to understand. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, first one. There are two types of voices in English. One is active voice and another one is passive voice. Generally, there is a question why there are two voices. Of course, without changing the meaning, there are two constructions in the English known as active voice sentence and passive voice sentence. Obviously, there is no change in the meaning, right? But um, whenever we speak to our friends, teachers, family members, and other strangers, obviously we use active voice sentences. But in case of passive voice sentences, how the sentence is being reinterpreted. That's what we come to know active voice sentences and passive voice sentences. Of course, with a few examples in the later part of the slides, let us try to understand what it is. First, let us move on to the what is active voice. We usually use active voice in writing and speaking. As I told you already, this is a one fine example. For example, the girl kicked the ball. Okay, this is the one example for active voice sentence. Whereas the girl is a subject, kicked is a verb, and the ball is the object. The first one is the agent, second one is verb, and third one is recipient. First, what the subject is doing or what the subject does is known as the active voice tense. For example, whether it's a present tense or past tense or future tense or use of any model form, don't worry about it. What the subject does, this is known as the active voice sentences. Okay, whereas in case of passive voice sentences, of course, the sentence is going to be reconstructed. The subject in the second subject place, object would become in the object place, subject would be going, and the verb is also slightly modified. Okay, let us come to the later first. Later, um, first let us example. Okay, someone or something is doer. Otherwise, the girl in the sentence is doer or the action performer. Whereas the verb in the sentence is no, it is an action. What the subject is doing. Of course, the object obviously to someone or something else the recipient. Sometimes it may be a person or sometimes it may be an object. Okay. Now let us move to the next slide. Here is another example. For example, the rain soaked the pitch. Okay. The same kind of example. Rain is a subject, soak is a verb, and the pitch is the object. Okay. Now let us move on to the conversions. What is the first? Let us try to understand what is a passive voice sentence. In the passive voice, we change this around so that the recipient has something done to it by the agent. For example, first one, first example. Remember the first example, the girl kicked the ball. It is reconstructed in the passive voice sentences, whereas the object becomes subject, subject become object. So the ball verb, okay, like it was kicked, and now it is how does it change? For example, was kicked, because kicked is a past tense. As a result, it is become auxiliary verb plus main verb or a third form, right? And the third one, obviously, it is the by is the agent verb and the object of the sentence or subject of the active voice sentence. Okay, the ball was kicked by the girl. One more example. Let's see some later example. The pitch, of course, the rain choked the pitch. Whereas in the passive voice sentence, the pitch was choked by the rain. Okay, this is the simple sense conversion. Whereas in the sentence or in the active voice and passive voice conversion, it is possible to convert all 12 tenses along with the modal verbs. Okay, there are possibilities. Let's see later one by one. In this example, spot the use of active voice and passive voice sentence. Let us try to understand. Of course, I have given you two examples. With a simple two example, let us try to understand which one is active voice sentence and which one is a passive voice sentence. For example, the music was played by the DJ. Is it active voice or passive voice? Is it a passive voice sentence? Okay. The sun was hidden by the clouds. Is it active or passive? It is again passive. Delighted fans streamed onto the pitch. Delighted fans streamed onto the pitch. It's an active voice or passive voice? It is a active voice sentence. Right? And Mary wrote the letter to the head teacher or headmaster, we call them always. Mary wrote the letter to the head teacher. Is it active voice or passive voice? It is active voice. Danny was praised by the head teacher. Danny was praised by the headmaster or head teacher or principal. It is active voice or passive voice? It has become passive voice sentence. So probably you could have a better understanding towards what is an active voice and passive voice, and how are we supposed to understand active voice sentence and passive voice sentence with these examples. Now let us move on to the next slide. Of course, I'm going to give you the illustration further to understand what is active voice and what is passive voice. And being the technical students, why passive voice is important? Remember, all your technical writings are written in passive voice. Why? Generally, there is a question. Why the technical writings are being written in passive voice sentence? It's again very simple. Whereas the technical writing, what action has been done is being highlighted, whether who has done what. It is not necessary or it is not important here in the technical communications. Remember, technical communication, I don't mean that only in English, whereas all other subjects, all your major subjects, it has been written in passive voice, impersonal passive voice sentences. Why it is become impersonal passive voice? As I told you already, the sentences or actions does not require who does what. Instead, what kind of actions has been performed in the sentences or through the meaning is highlighted. That is why the passive voice sentences are highlighted or required in the sentence construction, especially technical English. Sometimes in the passive voice, let us come back to the passive voice. Sometimes in the passive voice sentences, the agent is left out. What is the agent? In active voice and passive voice, agent is none other than by. By is the agent verb. In some sentences, the agent is not required. For example, let us have one example. Previous example, rain choked the pitch. Okay, in the sentence, of course, there are possibilities. Rain, even sometimes, okay, before start of the match, the ground workers, they used to maintain the ground by watering the ground in order to make them become playable. Okay, so by the time it does not require the playground was choked. It means it is enough. Does not require by the rain or by the employees or by the workers. It does not require. Of course, the primary purpose is the pitch was choked and ready to play. That's what. Like for example, the pitch was choked by the train. By the train is the agent, sometimes left out. For example, the agent, the rain is left out because, as I told already, it does not require. Sometimes it may be a rain has done something, or sometimes it has been done by the workers of the ground to prepare the ground. For example, it is to play by the players. Right. Let us have a few more example to understand what it is. Compare these sentences. One has agent and another one has not. Discuss the differences. The man was murdered by someone. The man was murdered by the, it is a simple active voice and passive voice sentence. The man was murdered by someone. It's a passive voice sentence. The man was murdered by someone. Of course, here in the sentence, we do not know who. Someone is a common term, has been referred. Either it may be a male, or it may be a female, or it may be a thief, or it may be a common one, or family members, or whatever it is. It does not require. Instead, the action is highlighted in the sentence. As a result, the core idea is delivered. The man is murdered. Okay, right? For example, one more example. We do not know who did the murder, so the agent is not needed. It is more dramatic without it. Like one more example. I see your car was damaged last night by my friend. Of course, it's very simple. I see your car was damaged last night. Okay, by my friend or by my brother, any members. Okay, even sometimes passerbys does not require. For better to leave the agent word if you don't want to involve. I mean, in sometimes if we do not know who has done what, obviously let us vomit. Okay, create your own passive voice sentences, which would be best without any agent. As I told you, the passive voice is generally found in more formal kinds of text, like for example, as I told you, textbooks, such as reports, whatever the book you are going to refer, or whatever the book you are having at present in your hand, they are known as the reports, forms and evaluations, etc. For example, a small amount of water was added to the picker while the mixture was heated by using Bunsen burner. Remember, in the sentence, was added is a one example, and was heated is another example to understand that the sentence is given in passive form. But look at the sentence. In the sentence, in both the sentences, of course, it's a compound sentence. In both the sentences, which are the person is not highlighted. Instead, what action has been taken is it is highlighted here. Like for example, the passive is used because the person doing action, the agent is not needed. Okay, like instead, what action has been done is highlighted. Instead, who has done what? It's not required. I mean, they're not highlighted. Like last but one slide. Sometimes passive voice is inappropriate in a story because it is used to describe a person being affected by events, just like in this passage. For example, in the middle of the night, Sebastian was woken by the most hideous screams. He jerked upright and his eyes sprang open. He was even more terrified by what he saw then. His flesh turned into goosebumps and his very blood curdled. His body was gripped by the paroxysms of horror. Okay. Look at the sentence. Question. Sometimes the passive voice is appropriate in a story. Remember, it's a small piece of story or a small situation because it is used to describe a person being affected. In the passage, what is highlighted? A person is affected. What kind of affection? Of course, he had a dream, whereas the dream was very, very terrifying. It's a nightmare. As a result, the boy has got fear, and all his nerve systems and the blood and everything was um, um, at the horror, at the a panic, just like okay, just like in the passage. For example, of course, as I told you, why particularly this slide has been given here, whereas in the previous slide, I told you that it is being used only in the formal context. But if there is a situation or the situation demands to write passive voice sentences even in informal cases, it is possible to use. Whereas the use of both active voice and passive voice is become everybody's tip of tongue. But using active voice and passive voice, depending upon the situation, really proves what kind of masteries or skills you have possessed. Okay, like of course in the classrooms, let us try to identify some examples. Okay, with the examples, let us try to understand what it is. Is that clear? Okay, let us discuss remaining things in the classroom.